Let's kick off our second session of the Art and AI Hua. So this session is called Know Thy Data, and we've got three fantastic speakers who are really going to be building on a key element that was discussed by Dr. Ala and Yoral, and that will be this idea of the data set, which is one of the core components, as you've just heard, of AI, because it's on that data that the AI model is trained to be able to learn and therefore replicate certain forms of human intelligence. And what I think we'll be looking at in the next conversation is if data becomes a foundational element of AI, what is represented in that data, what are the truths that data says, what are the emissions of that data, and how are we platforming certain stories, narratives, approaches to the world through the data sets that are being used to train the models that then are becoming increasingly pervasive in society. So we have Ashling, who is the founder and director of Beta Arts and Technologies Festival in Ireland. We have Wolosi Sollitt, who is the director of Future Everything in the UK. And we have Hadeer Omar, who is a new media artist and educator. So I'm going to hand over to the three of you, and really looking forward to hearing all of your perspectives. And Lucy, are you going to kick off?
I was about to say who's going first. I can do. Hello everyone. I'm really, really grateful to be here today, and thanks for having me as part of this series. And Future Everything is delighted to be having this ongoing relationship with the National Gallery of Jordan and Metaphor and the British Council. For those of you who don't know, Future Everything is a cultural think tank based in Manchester in the UK, with an emerging remit to explore the implications of technology through the lens of art and ecology. And we do this through creative R&D, commissions and exhibitions, technological prototyping, artist development, and many other activities alongside it. And we've done various projects over the years around AI and exhibitions and so on, from AI Who's Looking After Me to Plasmata, Bodies, Data's, Dreams. And in 2024, just to mention as well, we embarked on a process of bringing nature onto our board and really trying to think through the role that art and culture and technology can play in contributing to systems change, especially in the context of ecology. So that also drives the focus of my presentation. So as you'll already be aware, AI is becoming a go-to tool for many artists, and the artworks on this slide are both kind of using image generation tools to reconstruct colonial histories, and as a tool as well to create things like avatars, which help to bring worlds to life, used in kind of world building and story making. And I'd love to go into those in more detail, but don't have time, can pick it up later. But as we know, we've heard in the previous presentation, AI is not value neutral, and I won't go into all the examples of how it's not, because you've heard a bit about that. But I think, and you also heard a bit about AI's huge water consumption. But I think what has been kind of less explored more generally in kind of societal debate and in the cultural sector is particularly looking at AI's ecological entanglements in kind of broader terms. So both in terms of its physical environmental impact and the more profound implications it has for our relations with life on Earth. So in this presentation, what I'm going to try and do is briefly look at these entanglements and propose that this time of ecological collapse that we're in demands us to think more radically and creatively about how we approach AI, and really kind of propose that we need to reimagine AI if it's to play a role in supporting the flourishing of people and planet, rather than contributing to kind of extraction and the ecological destruction that we are seeing today. So first, just to contextualize this a little bit more, life on Earth faces existential challenges in the form of human-induced changes to atmospheric composition, landscape structure, and biodiversity. And anthropogenic habitat loss has resulted in the 6 major species extinction in the Earth's history, and that's what we're in currently. Also, you know, we're already past our 1.5% global warming target. Yet humans are inherently relational creatures, and these existential challenges don't just threaten the existence of life as we know it. They also play out on deeper relational levels. So the destruction of habitats, of species, of homes, it encompasses the loss of deep time relations that have composed our collective and localized identities for millennia. It's urgent that we, you know, become more aware of how technological tools such as AI contribute to the current crisis, both materially and relationally, with our more than human kin. And by more than human, just to say, I mean things like other animals, bacteria, plants, minerals, basically the web of life. And the image on this slide is from Matrix Vegetal, which is a film by artist Patricia Dominguez, which critiques our obsession with AI as a source of intelligence and instead foregrounds plant intelligence, exploring how this might recombine with technology to animate it differently. And as artists like Patricia Dominguez illustrate, technologies like AI become ever more as technologies like AI become ever more entangled with ecologies. I think there's actually an opportunity to open up more radical imaginaries for how we, as artists and cultural creators, collaborate with and use AI. So I'm going to briefly try and illustrate how our current kind of capitalist colonialist frameworks are driving a kind of version of AI which tends to reinforce extraction and abstraction from the web of life. And I'm going to explore it through 2 lenses. Firstly, the physical environmental footprint, and then how the technology is influencing, I think, our more than human relations. And then I'm going to come back to the kind of this central kind of question of how can we reimagine AI in order to chart more generative pathways forward for human and more than human flourishing. So just to highlight very briefly some of the ecologically kind of more destructive aspects of AI infrastructure as it stands currently. And the first graph illustrates the exponential increases in computer power demanded by AI. And the energy use of AI training and cloud computing now dwarfs the kilowattage usage of multiple countries combined, and is increasing all the time. And obviously that comes with this like vast amount of water consumption that's going on. And we know that all the effects of this are kind of felt very unevenly across the globe. And the second image is of a lithium mine. And lithium is crucial to the production of powerful batteries that enable things like AI to operate efficiently and continuously. Yet lithium mining is highly toxic and destructive and has devastating impacts on the ecologies and communities in its vicinity. And the vast majority of these mines are located in the global south. And finally, the increasing reliance on electronic devices in our lives is driving huge increases in e-waste. So a record 62 million tonnes of e-waste was produced in 2022. That's up 82% from 2010 and is reported by the UN to be on track to rise another 32% to 82 million tonnes in 2030. And there are, you know, all the time people are trying to kind of come up with efficiency solutions and things like that, using recycled water in cooling data centers and so on. But my question really is, how can we go beyond like the business as usual approaches that kind of tweak the existing system? How can we kind of go beyond the imaginary that's driving us as it stands? And this same imaginary is also dominating the role that AI plays in shaping our more than human relations. So the dynamics of this may be less tangible than things like mining and energy consumption, but they're no less real. So in the context of arts, climate science, biodiversity preservation, an over-reliance on the technological mediation of nature risks bypassing the formation of kind of real embodied and reciprocal relations with more than human, which are so vital to human and planetary thriving. So just to really quickly illustrate this with a couple of projects, one from science and one from arts, both of which have a shared goal of using AI to create awareness of and empathy for the more than human. So the first is Project SETI, which is a marine conservation initiative. And it's one of a growing number of projects which are being used to try to kind of use AI to try to enable interspecies communication. And SETI uses a combination of robotic sensors and machine learning to attempt to decode and translate the language of sperm whales into human terms. And one of the outcomes they see for this is to elicit empathy for the whales. And I have some kind of issues with this approach in that there is this use of kind of AI to decode and to reduce the complex life worlds of sperm whales into human terms is an extensionist kind of anthropocentric approach that I think is being used with little to no consideration of what consent might look like for the whales or what the risks might be. And a similar critique could be made of, for artificial realities, which Coral, which is a project by Rafak Anadol. And that piece combines AI with spectacular audio visuals intended to elicit empathy and draw attention to coral reef extinction. It foregrounds AI as the voice of nature rather than seeking more reciprocal forms of relationality. So while technology can certainly aid human understandings of life worlds, of our more than human kin, I think there's a techno-solutionist tendency in both these examples to mistake the technology as the end game. And I just want to bring up, if I've got a moment, the time, I know our time is really short, just a couple of thoughts on kind of how do we move beyond this. So, you know, we need to approach AI differently, and I think artists are really well placed to experiment with more radical imaginaries for this. And if we start to embrace the fact that AI is completely entangled with planetary life in ever more complex ways, both positive and negative, might new ways of imagining how we move forward with AI emerge? What if we see AI as an inherently technological technology? And what if art could help forge new pathways amidst the messiness of coming back to ourselves as embodied, emplaced and relational beings that exist within this kind of vital web of life? So projects like biologizing the machine, which is on the slide here, hint at the possibility of approaching AI as an ecological technology. So this project speculates on organic machine learning interfaces, creating pod-like structures made of kelp, which contain animatronic flying insects controlled by machine learning. And this piece highlights AI's role in the emergence of hybrid bodies and ecologies and points to a realignment of our machines and technologies with planetary biological intelligence. And finally, this project called The Listener by Lakota artist Susan Kite combines kind of indigenous knowledge and cosmologies to create an artwork whose interface kind of hints at more embodied and relational approaches to technology. Could such approaches aid the reimagining of how AI can be part of restoring and building more than human relations? I think it possibly could. So just to briefly describe, in The Listener, Suzanne Kite creates a kind of virtuous circle between the human body, indigenous cosmologies and AI. In the performance, Kite follows projected geometric patterns constructed from Lakota women's quilt shapes and uses them as a compass to direct how she moves a braid of hair. Then the movements affect a synthesizer, and machine learning listens to that synthesizer and then in turn decides how to move the compass, and that moves Kite and the spiral continues. And this piece indicates the possibility to frame AI within logics that are much more kind of relational and embodied and infused by different knowledge systems. So woven with rare earth metals, sound electronics, sacred plants such as sweetgrass and sage, and a radio transmitter package, the hair braid becomes a technology for reconstructing the future. It's a future that embraces the material messiness of the present while bringing us back to ourselves as beings existing in a communicative web of life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for sharing that with you. And I feel what you've really done there is taken what was two very technical presentations that raised some really tangible social, cultural, and ethical considerations around AI, and then open up the speculative if we're identifying that there is an issue, that AI is not representative, that technologies are currently progressing in a way which is extractive, both in terms of human and non-human environmental populations. How do we imagine alternatives? How do we break the cycle of that we're currently in of engaging with these very, very pervasive technologies? So thank you for that provocation. We'll come to questions after the three of you. Hadeer, I would love to hand over to you now to speak, if you'd be open to coming in next.
Sure, of course. Thank you guys so much. اوكي انا اسمي هدير عمر. انا مبسوطه جدا ان انا ابقى معاكم النهارده. انا مدرسه في جامعه فيرجينيا كومنولث في قطر، مصريه وشغاله also نيو ميديا ارتست. بشتغل ما بين النيو تكنولوجيز والستوريز والارتس، فبحاول ان انا ادمج ما بين الثلاثه. وسريعا كده هبتدي ان انا اتكلم على ايه اللي انا بعمله. بس انا بدل ما انا اتكلم كارتست النهارده، بحاول ان انا اتكلم كإديوكيتور واهميه الإديوكيشن، الارت education when it comes to العالم اللي احنا فيه دلوقتي، وازاي ان احنا نكوب معاه. انا هرجع تاني للتايتل بتاع العنوان بتاع البرزنتيشن وورد بيلدينج، عشان احنا كذا حد اتكلم عن الورلد بيلدينج النهارده، ف it's good ان احنا نرجع لها. خليني ارجع. اوكي، انا بدرس فنون وديزاين في الجامعه، ومينلي بشتغل في تايم بيز ميديا، يعني موستلي حاجات ليها علاقه بال 4 دي انيميشن، من جيف لغايه فيرتشوال رياليتي. فشغلي بيشتغل على اساس الفكره ان احنا ازاي ان احنا نبقى طول الوقت عندنا فكره الفضول ايه الجديد، ايه اللي نقدر ان احنا نشتغل بيه، وفي نفس الوقت ان احنا على اساسه نقدر نقول ايه. الستودنتس لما بيجوا لي من هاي سكول، بيبقوا اكتريتهم واخدين الاديوكيشن اللي هو متعودين عليه، اللي هو اكتريته بيبقى either art history او بيبقى اكتريته بيبقى crafts او drawing. فابتدينا ان احنا بنيجي الستودنتس معانا في الاول، بنبتدي ان احنا نبقى هم عندهم expectations كده من المدرس، ان هو هيديلهم كل حاجة وهم هيعملوا بس تطبيق للي احنا بيتقال لهم. بس انا ببقى اول لما باخدهم بحاول ان انا اديلهم شويه تشالنجز كده، ان بدل لما هم يبتدوا ان هم يدوروا بره ايه الترندز، ايه اللي موجود اوريدي حواليهم وعايزين يقلدوه، ان هم يبتدوا يبصوا جواهم، وان هم يبتدوا يشوفوا ان هم عندهم قصص وعندهم حاجات كتير ممكن ان هم تشارك مع ناس تانية غيرهم. ف one of the exercises اللي احنا بنبتدي بيها الاول، ان احنا بننزل شارع او بننزل اي مكان الاول، ان احنا بنعمل فوتو ووكس، ان نخليهم ان هم يتعلموا اصلا ازاي ان هم يشوفوا العالم اللي حواليهم، وازاي ان هم يحطوا العالم ده في فريم، وان ايه الحاجات العناصر اللي تتحط في الفريم versus الحاجات اللي هي مش عايزين تبقى تتحط جوه الفريم. و critically think الصورة معناها ايه، وايه لازمتها، وليه احنا محتاجينها، وليه عايزين ان احنا نوصل اللي احنا عايزين نوصله. الستودنتس بيبتدوا ان هم يشتغلوا باي ميديم معاهم. انا مش بديلهم اي نوع من الليميتيشن للميديم. ببقى عندي فضول برضو ان هم اخليهم ان هم to get exposed لطرق كتيره للكريتيف بروسيس. بس a lot of it بتبقى ليها علاقه من references من قصصهم هم وحياتهم هم. الأول لما بنيجي نشتغل معاهم بنخليهم إن هم يعملوا references من artists حواليهم أو ناس ما كانش عارفين إن هم they exist، الشغل بتاعهم they exist. فبنحاول إن إحنا على قد ما نقدر إن إحنا نفتح مجال وعيهم عن الارت وورلد، إن هو ما يبقاش بس ليه علاقة بالحاجات اللي بيلاقوها على بنترست أو الحاجات اللي بيلاقوها على جوجل. بنخليهم إن هم يروحوا المكتبات، نخليهم إن هم أي نوع من البحث، انترفيوهات، يروحوا يدوروا في archives، ان هم على قد ما يقدروا ان هم يقدروا to get inspired بأي طريقة ليها علاقة بالشغل اللي هم عايزين يعملوه. الاستوديو حركي جدا ومليان احداث كتير طول الوقت، بس في نفس الوقت انا بحاول اخليه ان هو طول الوقت يبقى experimental، وفي نفس الوقت له علاقة بان يبقى ارجع تاني في كلمة الفضول، عشان الفضول للارتست هو ده المحركه الاساسي، لان هو يفضل يتعلم وان هو يفضل طول الوقت عنده الشغف ان هو انا لسه مش عارف ولسه هتعلم حاجة جديدة. مع ان في دلوقتي تكنولوجيز كتير احنا بنشتغل بيها جوه الفصل، وحاجات كتير ليها علاقة بالريسيرش بتاعي أنا بطبقه في الفصل ليهم، زي التولز اللي احنا اوريدي اتكلموا عليها في البرزنتيشنز كلها اللي فاتت. أنا هوريكم يعني شوية حاجات كده صغيرة احنا بنعملها ليها علاقة من ده، بس في نفس الوقت احنا بنحاول ان احنا على قد ما نقدر نوصل الاول للبيسكس بتاعه الكريتيف بروسيس، اللي هو البري برودكشن، الريسيرش، ان هو يبقى عارفين هم عايزين يقولوا ايه اصلا. الكور هو القصه، الكور هم فين من واقع القصة دي كلها، وان في نفس الوقت هنوصل ايه للجمهور، او نوصل ايه إيه اللي انا عايزه اكسبرس اصلا. ما يبقاش هو بس الموضوع ليه علاقة بايه ايه الترندنج دلوقتي، او ايه اللي السوق عايزه، او ايه التولز اللي موجوده فانا مجبر ان انا استخدمها. فزي ما شايفين ان هي بيبقى في ميكس ميديا كتير بنشتغل بيها، وكل ما يبقى في حركات كتير ما بين الوسائط التعددية ليها علاقة بالميكينج، كل ما الستودنتس بيتعلموا فوكابلري انضج، لان هم يقدروا تو ميكس ما بين كل الحاجات دي ببعض، ليها علاقة بالسينما، او ليها علاقة بالتكنولوجيا، او ليها علاقة بالتاريخ، او ليها علاقة جغرافيا. فكل ما يبقى عندهم نضج في الوعي ايه اللي بيحصل حواليهم، لما بيجوا في الفصل وبيجوا بياخدوا البريف بيبقى في ريسيرش اقوى ان هم يبتدوا يشتغلوا عليه. الستودنتس بيجت اكسبوز لحاجات كتير ليها علاقه بالتكنولوجيا، زي الفيرتشوال رياليتي والاي ار والبروجكشن، وكل الحاجات دي ليها علاقه برضو بان ازاي ان احنا نستخدم ازاي ان احنا نوصل بيها القصص اللي احنا عايزين نوصل بيها. بس الانترستنج في الموضوع كله ان ساعات كتير لما بنيجي نشتغل احنا بنتعامل مع الاي اي، وده حاجات كتير قوي اوريدي اتكلمتوا فيها ليها علاقه بمثلا يوسج لمثلا زي ميد جيرني، او نستخدم تشات جي بي تي للسكريبت رايتنج، او اي نوع من التكنولوجي اللي موجوده او الابلكيشنز اللي موجوده. انا بطلب من الستودنتس الاول ان هم يروحوا ويدوروا على الابس الجديده، ويدوروا على التكنولوجيز اللي موجوده تكزيست غير الحاجات اللي انا بديها لهم، بسبب ان انا بتعلم منهم برضو ايه اللي موجود وايه الاب تو ديت، ونبتدي ان احنا تتستد في الفصل. فهو الفكره ان احنا ما نبقاش بس ان احنا بنطبق او نستخدم الابس، احنا بنحاول ان احنا تو اكزامين ات، وان احنا نشوف نقدر ان احنا نوصل بيها ايه. زي كأن ان احنا لما بنيجي نشتغل على بروجكت، بنيجي الاول انا كدايركتور او انا كارتست عايز اشتغل دلوقتي مع كولابوريتورز تانيين، لازم ان انا ابتدي ان انا ابني علاقه مع الكولابوريتورز التانيين اللي هشتغل معاهم. لازم الاول اشوف البورتفوليو بتاعهم والنتائج اللي هم هيعملوها، لازم ان انا بريك داون البادجت بتاعتهم، هم هيكلفوني قد ايه، او اجي ان انا اشوف التايم لاين بتاعي الكولابوريتور ده هيحتاج قد ايه، او النظره الابداعيه بتاعتهم اصلا اذا كان متشابهه معايا ولا لا. فلما باجي اعمل كده انا بتعامل بنفس الاداء مع الاي اي، بستخدمه ان هو كانه كولابوريتور، وان انا في at the end of the day اي حاجه بتطلع لي من الاي اي انا اللي في الاخر الدايركتور، انا اللي عندي الكريتيف فيجن، وانا اللي بحدد اذا كان ده ينفع للريسيرش اللي انا بعمله ولا لا. بس في حاجات ليها علاقه بان احنا احنا مثلا لما بنيجي نعمل التست دي كتير قوي بنبتدي ان احنا نشوف في مشاكل بتبتدي ان هي تواجهنا، زي مثلا الستيريوتايبس، especially ان احنا بنشتغل في الكونتكست الوطن العربي، بيبقى فيه stereotyping كتير جدا ليها علاقة بالايمجري، وليها علاقة كمان بالصورة اللي الاي اي بيعملها. يعني الاي اي له شكل معين كده للصورة، احنا بنبقى عارفينه ان هو ده الاستاتيك بتاعة الاي اي، اللي لغاية دلوقتي هو اي اي بيحاول تو بريك ات، بس في تولز كتير جدا ليها علاقة بالفيلم وليها علاقة بالانيميشن وكده لسه ما اتطورتش جدا. انا مش بقول عليها ان هي كويسة او وحشة، انا بتكلم فيها ان احنا تو examine it، ونفضل طول الوقت كريتيكال، وطول الوقت عندنا دراية بازاي ان الحاجة مثلا من 2022 لما ميد جيرني اتفتح او ان هو بقى اكسسبل للناس، الكواليتي اللي كانت بتطلع للصورة غير خالص الكواليتي اللي بتحصل دلوقتي. وفي نفس الوقت دي هتفيدني في ايه؟ هتفيدني في ان انا مثلا ابتدي ان انا مثلا ما ادورش على الريندرينجز، ما اقعدش اشتغل بالساعات على الريندرينجز، واشتغل مثلا على more in the research والinvestigations، وابتدي ان انا انزل الشارع اكتر واسال ناس اكتر والملم داتا انا محتاجها للريسيرش عشان يبقى اوثنتيك، وعشان ما بقاش ان انا ضايع في الاونلاين بيديهولي او الابس بتديهالي، وما بقاش على درايه ان انا يعني انا عايزه اقول قصه سبيسيفيك عن كوميونتي معين، عن ريليجن معين، او عن حادثه معينه او تراما معينه. لازم اعمل ديب ريسيرش. AI ممكن يساعدني، بس في نفس الوقت لازم انا افضل ان انا اللي فوقيه، انا اللي بتحكم في البتاع، وارجع واعمل اراجع كل اللي بيتعمل، وان انا تو فاكت تشيك كل حاجه بتحصل. ده on a daily basis احنا بنعمل الموضوع ده. الستودنتس على اساسه بيبتدوا يستخدموا الميد جيرني او اني اوف ذيس تولز، ان هم يبتدوا ان هم يعني يستخدموا التولز دي كانها another collaborator زي ما انا قلت، in a way ان هم يبتدوا ان هم مثلا يعملوا sketching، او يبتدوا ان هم to visualize حاجات ليها علاقة بالشغل بتاعهم. وفي نفس الوقت بنبتدي ان احنا على اساسها ان احنا نشتغل اكتر على المنتج اللي احنا عايزين نشتغل عليه. besides ان احنا لما بنيجي نشتغل with AI again we have to consider ال narratives اللي احنا محتاجين نقولها. a lot of the times لما ال students بيجوا من غير توجيه، وان انا بتكلم على التوجيه ان either الجامعات او mentorship او الشخص نفسه يبقى self critical in a way ان هو ما يبقاش يتساق مع ال narratives اللي بتتحط either online او الحاجات اللي عشان ما نحصلش ان احنا بنتهمش قصصنا. وفي نفس الوقت دلوقتي في festivals وفي a lot of galleries حتى they're interested in just getting يعني ان هم to showcase AI work. فالماركت ابتدى يختلف تماما دلوقتي، والبرايسنج بقى غير، والبادجيتنج بقى غير، والتايم لاينز بقت غير بسبب الموضوع ده. فان احنا كارتست محتاجين ان احنا نبقى في الموضوع. انا بس كنت عايزه اقول ان ازاي ان احنا بنشتغل again على فكرة الاركايفنج. ستودنتس أكتريتهم 17 سنة 18 سنة بيبقوا لسه جايين. a lot of the times لما بتدي لهم بريف ما بيبقوش عارفين يبتدوا منين، أو تعمل لهم ازاي بريك داون لحاجة. ده اكسرسايز صغير ان انا بقول لهم ان هم يعملوا انترفيو لحد هم بيحبوه، ومن خلال ده بيبتدوا ان هم يشتغلوا على سكريبتس، ويبتدوا يشتغلوا على اركايفنج، ويبتدوا ان هم تو كولكت انفورميشن عن الناس اللي في حياتهم، ويبتدوا ان هم يكتبوا قصص. either ان هم يستخدموا الاي اي للبري برودكشن فيز، او البرودكشن او البوست برودكشن. the most important thing واحنا بنشتغل ان هم يبقوا بيعملوا كريديتنج لايه الحاجات اللي الاي اي ساعدهم فيها، وايه الحاجات اللي هم اشتغلوا عليها مع نفسهم او ساعدهم فيها. عشان زي ما بيشتغلوا مع اي كولابوريتور لازم يبقوا عندهم درايه على اللي برضو اللي هو الحق، يعني اللي هو تمام. انا when I'm googling something انا ما بكتبش ان انا I credit Google for searching this. بس نفس الوقت AI دلوقتي داخل في حياتنا اكتر بكتير، فما ينفعش ان احنا نبقى نتعامل معاه معاملة اللي هو انا هعمله وهاخده ككريدت ليا فولي. ف بس انا هو ده انا كده، هي دي البرزنتيشن بتاعتي.
Thank you so much, Hadeer. And I think again, you kind of captured that idea that artists innovate, artists play, artists look to find new ways to create with whatever technology, but to do that without unpicking the technology and understanding it and finding a way to make it feel relevant. that is to lose a degree of agency and as part of the artistic practice, and that really kind of shone through in the work that you do. So thank you. Ashlyn, over to you.
Um, Thank you so much, Hannah. It's such a pleasure to be here. So, thank you so much for the invite and to the organizers and everyone for pulling all of this together. It's great to be here. So my name is Ashling Murray. I'm the founder of Beta Festival, which is Ireland's Festival of Art and Technology. So we founded Beta Festival to critically engage with technology's impact on society, specifically looking at technologies like immersive technologies and artificial intelligence, especially when you look at what is happening in terms of policy making nationally within Ireland, but also internationally, and how do artists engage with that, and how does that reach the public? So Beta has two main areas of focus, one which is nurturing the artistic ecosystem around art and technology, and the other which is audience-centered programming underpinned by tech and digital literacy, so creating an opportunity for audiences to explore the ethical implications of new and emerging technologies. To do this, we have a research partnership with Ireland's leading research centre for artificial intelligence and digital content in Ireland, who are Adapt Research Centre, and they have particular expertise in ethics, having developed this ethics canvas, which has been created to encourage educators, entrepreneurs, and engineers and designers to engage with ethics in their research and innovation. And this is something that we've been looking at in relation to how this maps onto artistic practice and within the framework of the festival. So as part of this, we use this and other tools to think through these new technologies in a dedicated space during the festival called the Ethics Studio, where audiences and artists come together to dig deeper into the research and tools available to consider these impacts. I suppose we're having this moment where our relationships with data and with each other are, with our own sense of agency, I suppose, are being rewritten and influenced by machine learning systems. And so how can we make this rewriting legible, accountable, and also creative? So starting with the basics, I mean, we've heard a lot about this already from the previous speakers and from our earlier speakers at the beginning of the session. But, AI isn't magic. In fact, it's very human. And the utopian and dystopian positioning of AI is frequently unhelpful. But what we do need to is engage people in critical thinking. And these are two of my favorite quotes. So the first from Cathy O'Neill's book, Weapons of Math Destruction, that algorithms are opinions embedded in code. They are already powered by massive data sets that reflect and often amplify inequities already present in society. And then the second quote from Ruha Benjamin, who reminds us that tools are coded in old biases, is only surprising if we equate technological innovation with social progress. Data is never neutral. This has come up a few times, but it is structured by choices. So what gets measured, whose bodies and voices are represented, and whose are omitted entirely. So projects like this by Johan Diedrich called Dark Matters expose this beautifully, showing how the absence of Black voices and voice interfaces like Siri and Alexa speak volumes about the racial politics embedded in AI systems. We must understand AI not only as technical, but also geopolitical, creating cultural hegemonies and extractive labor. So Kate Crawford and Vladan Gelair, who actually just won the Golden Lion Award at Venice Biennale over the weekend for this piece, Calculating Empires, maps 500 years of entwined colonial, military, and technological power. From slave ships to server farms, the imperial logics of extraction persist, digital colonialism. Only now they wear the face of innovation. Across regions, these logics play out differently. So in Europe, we're seeing the legally binding EUA Act come into effect, which leads globally in governance, but often offers only partial protection for artists and cultural labour under the broadness of content and copyright. In Australia, by contrast, there's explicit recognition of AI's harm to cultural industries and Indigenous knowledge. So what's at stake is not just who gets represented in datasets, but who gets to define the future. I want to look at a few artistic projects dealing and working with and against and subverting and resisting data bias. So starting with this project, The Feminist Dataset by Caroline Sinders, which is a public-facing social justice art practice. The collecting of feminist data is held through public workshops with this project. And it imagines data creation as well as data sets and archiving as an act of protest. And in a time where so much personal data is caught and hidden by large technology companies used for targeted advertising and algorithmic suggestions, what does it mean to make a data set about political ideology, one designed for use as protest and to make data set as a community? I also love that this piece is very much about technology, but it's incredibly analog practice, which is really beautiful. This is ZZ Querying the Dataset by Jake Yules, which disrupts facial recognition training sets with drag and gender fluid images, shifting the algorithm towards ambiguity and fluidity. The project aims to tackle the lack of representation and diversity in the training datasets often used by facial recognition systems. And the video was made by disrupting these systems and retraining them with the addition of 1,000 images of drag and gender fluid faces found online. This causes the weights inside the neural network to shift away from the normative identities it was originally trained on and into a space of queerness. So it means that this piece lets us peek inside the machine learning system and visualize what the neural network has and hasn't learned. So the work is a celebration of difference and ambiguity and invites us to reflect on bias in our data-driven society. This next project is Boogaloo Bias by Derek Curry and Jennifer Gradecki. So this is an interactive artwork that highlights some of the known problems with law enforcement agencies' use of facial recognition technologies. So the way, certainly in Ireland, there's a big debate around it at the moment because the police force have been granted agency to use facial recognition technology in Ireland. So this piece draws awareness to that, including the practice of brute forcing, where in the absence of high quality images of a suspect, agents have been known to substitute the images of celebrities that their suspect is reported to resemble. So the Boogaloo Bias facial recognition algorithm is trained on the faces from the characters of a movie called Electric Boogaloo, and every match is a false positive. So drawing attention, or as a reminder, I suppose, of how flawed and dangerous these systems can be. Then I just wanted to speak a little bit about Holly Herndon's project, which some of you may be familiar about, Holly Plus. So Holly Plus is Holly Herndon's digital twin. So she uses machine learning to create freely available online instruments and tools that encourage anyone to create freely available online instruments and tools that encourage anyone to create art with her AI voice and image. As part of the art and research project experimenting with the economy around her digital likeness. The first Holly Plus instrument allowed anyone to upload their audio to Holly Plus to the website and receive a version sung back in Holly's voice. During this process, she coined the term spawning to describe the act of creating entirely new media with an AI system trained on older media. So spawning is now not only this new coined term that kind of describes how you can collaborate with AI or how work is created with AI, but it's also a platform now that Holly Herndon and Matt Dreyer has created that allows artists to opt in or opt out of data sets, pushing back against consentless data scraping in generative AI models, including their Have I Been Trained tool, where you can see if your work has been used in any of the large models. These practices reframe the question, what if data isn't just something we extract, but something we care for, curate, and even co-create? Ireland sits at a unique crossroads within art and technology. It's a global tech hub and the European headquarters for many of the big tech firms, but also home to some of the most respected researchers in AI and ethics, including Barry O'Sullivan and Abeba Baram, both of whom have and are working with the EU and UN on AI ethics policies and frameworks. And as part of this, Ireland created an AI advisory council, independent of the government. However, as seems to be happening frequently in the development of policy, there is no one with an arts and cultural background as part of this advisory group. So in response to this idea, this year at Beta Festival, we hosted the AI Art Assembly, and the idea was to address this or to bring together artists, technologies, policymakers to unpack the impact of AI on creative work. And out of this event, we published a report, and the kind of key findings were a need for clear and evolving definitions, demystifying AI jargon. I think this came up earlier as well, is the way in which language is used. A call for artist-led policy, so not just corporate first frameworks, and really including them in the process. And a recognition that ethics can't be an afterthought, they must be baked into our data sets, our models, and our funding systems. So just to finish up, because I know we're running a little bit over, but just to I guess comparing or looking, I suppose, across the EU, UK, Australia, we see different cultural priorities. So the EU, and by extension Ireland's own national artificial intelligence strategy, leads with legislation but lacks any specific focus on the cultural sectors. The UK, from my understanding, has a strong emphasis on innovation. Australia, as I mentioned, is one of the few to recognise the importance of protecting creative labour and Indigenous data sovereignty. And then China's framework comes within cultural data through a lens of national security. So what's clear is that cultural policy and AI need to converge more. Otherwise, we risk a future where artistic labour is devalued and cultural memory is algorithmically flattened. So what does it mean to know thy data? It means recognizing that data is power, and like all power, it must be held to account. It means understanding that behind every training set are real people, real communities, and real consequences. It means asking who is training whom? Are we teaching machines to reflect the world or remake it? And what is the role of the arts and indeed artists in this? So as we look ahead, I suppose three things to consider are: transparency is not enough. We need accountability, co-ownership, and consent. Artists are not content generators, they're critical agents and stewards of culture. And policy must be participatory, and that includes those who work at the edges: artists, technologists, educators, and activists. Thank you.
No, thank you, Ashlyn. And what a fantastic series of provocations to think about in terms of what knowing thy data means. And it's worth saying that the Art and AI Assembly and the kind of dialogue you created across sectors in Ireland has been a real reference for us, for me certainly, in thinking about this dialogue we're having today. So fantastic question that's been shared by Larissa. If you're still online, Larissa, would you like to come online and ask that question, perhaps to all of the speakers, because I think all of the speakers will have an opinion on it.
Thank you so much. Yes, as Hannah, you mentioned, the question is for all the lovely speakers. So I think we all know that when data sets shape AI's truth, so whose cultures, languages, and histories get erased. So how can artists rewrite these algorithmic narratives, in your opinion? Thank you.
Yeah, Lucy, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, it's a big question. It's a good one. I mean, there was an artwork at the start of my presentation, which I didn't get to talk about, by Wlosi Desire, an artist duo, where they're using it's a kind of version of a use of Midjourney that I liked, that I saw recently in an exhibition called Salter Colleges that was at Somerset House. And it was just nice because they were using Midjourney as a tool to kind of bring back to kind of redraw histories that have been erased. In this case, it was a piece of colonial infrastructure that was used by the British when ruling India, and they used Midjourney to kind of generate images of it that no longer existed. So they brought it back to life in that way, as part of kind of, taking the machine learning and getting it to do something that is actually around decolonizing histories and the present day as well. And I think Susan Kite's work is also kind of really trying to rework using the kind of interface of reaction. We're using kind of the body and Lakota quilting geometry to kind of feed that back into the data, into the machine, as data into the machine learning.
أنا ممكن أرد. يعني من الeducational side، مش بس الارتست، يعني حتى احنا for us as like حتى كرياكت artists، في شغل already بيشتغل. يعني مثلا علاقة اللغة، يعني إن مثلا العربي، أو إن إزاي إن احنا نبقى ما يبقاش اللغات التانية beyond الإنجليش هو ده اللي بيشتغل عليه مثلا كحاجة secondary أو حاجة بعد ما تكون after thought، بعد ما يكون كل يعني بنتهمش يعني. ففي شغل كتير ليه علاقة باللانجوج والارتس. ابتدى ان هو a lot of artists يبتدوا ان هم ياخدوا initiative ان هم يشتغلوا مع technologists وكودرز، ويبتدوا ان هم يبقوا بيجيبوا كل النولج اللي هم يعرفوها من ال traditional way of researching، وان هم يبقوا consultants، او ان هم يبتدوا ان هم يشتغلوا بطريقة ليها يعني اكتف، ان هم ان واي ان هم يقدروا يصلحوا للتول. في زي تشات جي بي تي، ليا ارتست كتير صحابي بيخشوا في مناقشات مع تشات جي بي تي، لان ازاي ان هم يصلحوا لهم. يعني لما بياخدوا المعلومه ما بيسكتوش، بيفضلوا ان هم يفيدوا يدوا لها كمان المعلومه اللي هم شايفين ان هي صحيحه، وان هم يبتدوا ان هم يعلموا والتشالنج الشات جي بي تي. انا بتكلم على البيسك تولز اللي احنا بنشتغل بيها كل يوم، مش الميجا بروجكتس. بس يعني I think ان بس هي الفكرة ان كل واحد فينا يبقى مسؤول، وان يبقى طول الوقت على دراية بس بايه اللي بيحصل، وان هو ما نبقاش بس بن passive consumers. هو ده اللي انا حاسة ان المفروض نبقى كده فيه.
Ashlyn, do you have anything you'd like to add? Well,
Yeah, just very quickly, sorry, I know we're so over, but I mean, just kind of reiterating a little bit of what I spoke through already. But I think, there is opportunity in kind of intervening in some of these data and technologies and the way in which they're created. Yeah, I think just yeah, looking at those different ways that can kind of be resist further the way in which these technologies are dominating.
thank you so much. Over to you, Haldun.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, everyone. بسعدني بالختام أشكر كل اللي شاركونا من حضور، من متحدثين. كنا بنتمنى كان معنا وقت أطول وأطول نستفيد من خبراتهم ومعلوماتهم القيمة. إن شاء الله في فرص قد يعني مقبلة راح نقدر نستضيف هؤلاء الضيوف حتى يكونوا يشرفوا على برامج ونستفيد من خبرتهم ضمن برامج ننسق لها فيما بعد إن شاء الله بالتعاون ما بيننا وبين شركائنا. بدي أنوه لشغلة مهمة. لسه في كتير جوانب مميزة وراح تضيف للكل. راح يكون معنا كمان 4 ضيوف جدا مميزين بخوضوا في هذا السؤال الأخير اللي كنا ختمنا عنده حول سياسات التمثيل وأخلاقيات التمثيل بين الثقافات. فراح يكون معنا بكرة في الجلسة الأولى هيثم نوار ودكتورة بسمة حمدي للحديث عن اللغة وعن تعريب التطبيقات، بالإضافة لوجود أيمن غربي ونورة البدري كمان في الحديث عن الكود والجوانب الأخرى المتعلقة في هذا التقاطع بين الفنون والذكاء الاصطناعي. شكرا جزيلا لكم جميعا، أتمنى لكم مساء سعيد. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you to all of our speakers and our participants. Have a lovely evening.